Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. As we start, can you maybe talk a little bit about your current role and what's in your purview?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am the current Chief Revenue Officer of AppOmni, a
Mhm.
startup out of Silicon Valley that's in the SaaS security posture management space, and
Mhm.
I've been here for exactly 3 years.
Awesome. And what's within your what kind of teams are reporting to?
So I have the field sales organization, 24 regional sales managers in the US, Europe, and ANZ. I've got the sales engineering organization that supports them, about half as many supporting that team. I also have all of our alliances, channels, and business development.
Awesome. So it's you have busy days, I can imagine. So just kind of to give our listeners a little bit more of a kind of a not just a data point, but more of an arc. I've noticed in your background you had some Palo Alto, Citrix. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the trajectory? What kind of led you to this role?
Sure. So putting it in terms of sort of the path to cybersecurity as my career, as a kid, I loved programming. I did it on Commodore 64s and 128Ds, was sort of a very unsophisticated hacker, getting access to long distance, living in Germany to post to BBSs back in the States and cracking games and that sort of thing. And didn't really think of it as a career until my first job out of college. Went straight from UVA to New York City and worked for a headhunting firm that specialized in placing Solaris Unix sysadmins and developers in the banks in New York. And a colleague of mine went to a startup in the Valley called Oblix, Kleiner Perkins funded company, and asked me to come aboard as their first inside salesperson. So I spent a year doing that here in the East Coast. Within a year, I moved out to a regional sales manager role for a company called Aventail in the SSL VPN space. And you mentioned some of the companies I've worked for since. It's been 5 acquisitions over the past 22 years. And I've always strongly preferred to work for startups. Fortunately or unfortunately, they've done well enough that all of them have been acquired.
It's awesome. It's almost like you have this gold the Midas touch, the golden touch. So the startups that you work for get acquired, or there's some sort of positive outcome. It seems.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been very lucky. Yeah.
that's great. And so it's I mean, as you can imagine, kind of cybersecurity as an industry has grown both in terms of share of mind, kind of all the way from board of directors and C-level executives to journalists, and you have experience with startups. It seems up until recently there was just so much venture money going into space, and I think as a result there's a lot more interest from all sorts of professionals um, to get into this space and make a career out of this. I think you have a very unique perspective, both working from startups and large organizations that end up acquiring the startups you're working for, but also I think having a technical background and working in sales gives you a very unique and interesting vantage point, because not everyone has kind of both kind of the hacker mentality, or knowing what CISOs, what cybersecurity professionals are dealing with, but also coming from kind of a sales perspective. So from that standpoint, for someone who's just kind of starting in their career path, maybe more junior professionals, maybe someone trying to switch from technology sales to cybersecurity sales, or maybe even students in colleges as they're kind of pondering what they're going to do with the rest of their life, like what's your advice uh, from perspective kind of your career and your success? What are kind of the top 3 things they should focus on in your view now to set them up for success later?
I don't think anybody should get into this space if they don't have a passion for technology. And it doesn't necessarily have to be cybersecurity, but you've got to be naturally curious about tech, want to understand, not just the product that you're selling, at your first company, but the entire ecosystem of technology that surrounds that product. And I think it's very hard to be credible in front of a, chief information security officer or a security architect or a buyer if you don't have some background um, and understanding of what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I think people buy from people who can teach them something, and people that are really passionate about what they're selling. So if you have that, and you combine that with drive, passion, grit, that's really all you need to be successful in cybersecurity. But I think it all starts with that passion for technology. It really translates to customers and prospects when you're meeting with them, especially if you're in a new space and you're evangelizing a new category that may be replacing an old one. I think it takes people who believe in what they're doing and are really excited about what they're selling.
Certainly, it makes a lot of sense. Well, it sounds like the gist of it is you have to be prepared to be excited about this space for a long time. And if you're not, you'll burn out and you will churn out at some point.
Yeah, and to young people that are just getting into it, if you've got that passion for it and excitement, I think it's really important to take risks early in your career. I sort of backed into earlier stage startups. If I could do it over again, I would have gone to a seed series or Series A company from the very beginning. I don't think there's much to lose when you're earlier in your career. You learn much more working for a startup. You have to wear many more hats than you would in a larger company. There really is no single right way to sell. I'm pretty, I guess, not pessimistic, but critical of sales methodologies. I don't think that there is any one right way to sell. You kind of have to figure that out, in your career, and who your likely buyers are to be, because everybody, sells to different people. There's nobody that really successfully sells to every type of buyer. And I think the only people making money off of sales methodologies are the people who are selling them. So don't be afraid to kind of follow your own instincts around how to build trust and relationships and sell your product. There's many different ways to do it.
Certainly. And speaking of sales methodologies, it seems like even though conceptually the idea is it's about persuasion, it's getting into a room with a certain unique point of view about a problem and educating your prospect about the problem, and hopefully your solution is the one that fits.
Yeah, exactly.
The person.
I think that the problem with sales methodologies is that they assume that everybody you meet with is a good prospect. And the truth is that, depending on timing or the specific environment of the company that you're speaking with, your product may or may not be of real value to them. And it's such a big market. The hardest thing for salespeople to do is to walk away and admit, early in a process to themselves that this, may not be a good prospect, and go focus on the ones that are. And I don't think that people really sell products to companies these days. They present the product, the capability, they articulate the value for similar customers, and they let the customer determine for themselves that your solution is of value to them. It's not about pushing people to buy something. It's about educating them and having them come to the conclusion that they need your product and it's going to improve their business and help them do their jobs. Certainly.
And so kind of if I'm reading between the lines, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but does it really mean that as a sales organization, your time will be better spent if you only focus on prospects who are showing intent in one form, shape, or maybe they're attending a workshop or a roundtable, maybe you caught them at RSA or Black Hat, maybe they downloaded some sort of resource from a website, and essentially, well, not ignoring the remainder of the total addressable market, but leave it to demand generation marketing to deal with. Is it kind of like divide and conquer philosophy?
No, I wouldn't say that, right? Intent data is interesting, and we have tools that provide that for us in many different ways. Like you said, obviously attending events and meeting people there, software solutions, SaaS services that gather that intent data from the internet and present it to us. But at the same time, you also want to be introducing who you believe your ICP are to the concept, right? To a new category. And that education process may result in a 2-year, 3-year sales cycle. So I don't think you ignore customers that aren't showing intent. You just don't push them to do something that they may not be ready to do. We do have to do a lot of education, and we understand going into it that it's going to take a long time to close, XYZ global bank. But if you don't get in there and educate them on your point of view, on your capabilities, on the category, before your competitors do, then you're not going to be able to compete for that business when they're ready. So, it just means focusing very, very narrowly on your ICP to the extent that you can, educating the ones that aren't ready, moving forward with the ones that are, and coming back to those early conversations further down the road when the customer has budget and has resources, to implement the solution effectively.
Certainly, it makes a lot of sense. We actually, from kind of our position, we do talk a lot to kind of CISOs on one side and cybersecurity vendors on the other. And from the CISO side, every time the subject of vendors comes up, often you get like a very visceral reaction. Some people say, well, I do have a corporate email. It does exist, but everything I do is through Slack, just because I just get so many solicitations. It's just impossible. Someone else said, my phone is on do not disturb from Monday morning until Friday afternoon, because I get total interruptions. Thank you to ZoomInfo and LinkedIn and all those other providers. But when you talk to cybersecurity vendors, the challenge is, to your point, when there are certain providers that show intent data, and in those cases, things are easy, right? So if someone is actively looking for a solution, they're booking demos, they're raising their hand, sales cycles are short. The biggest challenge that cybersecurity vendors that we talk to find is that, yes, there is some education, some evangelism, and required for the portion of ICP, the portion of total addressable market, who are upstream in their customer journey, they're not ready to buy. The biggest challenge that they have is that those people are just so busy putting out other fires and focusing on other problems, they just ignore everything. They ignore not just sales pitches, but also attempts to kind of educate and provide additional information. And that's kind of one of the points of just how to get the first face-to-face interaction, or the first interaction to get them started on this journey. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, from your perspective, from startups to large organizations, how do successful teams deal with those kind of challenges?
So there's no magic solution to that problem or silver bullet, but I think what's most effective is the idea of ecosystem selling, right? There's a lot of other vendors adjacent to you where, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And there's opportunities to partner with them at a field level, share intel about accounts, opportunities, stakeholders, and decision makers in those accounts, and keep each other aware of when timing might be right. So that's on the alliances side of things. At the same time, you need to explore every possible route to market and not discount any initially, right? When you're coming to the market with a new category, you don't know which route to market is going to be most effective. And as an example, here at AppOmni, I've worked with the global systems integrators at most of the companies that I've worked for previously, but it's taken many, many years to get traction with them. In contrast, we got traction very quickly with the largest of those GSIs at AppOmni, because the solution that we're selling happens to dovetail very nicely with billion-dollar plus consulting businesses that they have around deploying SaaS platforms, which is what our product secures. And so we didn't try to guess at what the right route to market was going to be at the beginning. 3 years ago, we pursued all of them: GSIs, security resellers, referral partners. We would go after vertical industry associations like healthcare, ISAC, HISAC, FSISAC, and the financial services space, and on and on. And we let multiple voices from each of those different routes to market and partnerships make their way to the CISOs that we would like to talk to and educate. And I think that's been really effective. We've done a really good job at getting access to the accounts that we believe are the best fit for our product. And we don't do it through, one or two different paths. It's through multiple paths. And again, not prejudging what the right one is going to be when you're starting out. And you figure that out, over time.
Certainly. I think it's very interesting perspective, because I know oftentimes sales teams are driven by monthly goals, quarterly goals. But what you're saying, as long as you're willing and prepared to play the long game and engage with stakeholders and the entire ecosystem, not just trying to ram through the door to that particular decision maker, you'll get rewarded. It's I guess, refreshing to see this kind of perspective, because I think what we often find is that it's playing a long game is not, it doesn't come naturally to all sales teams. Um,
It doesn't
so,
come naturally to your venture capital investors either. So,
well, it's, I guess, the board, the investors on the board that kind of drive the agenda for a lot of those conversations, and um, being able to play that long game, I think that's where the real rewards are for those kind of prepared and willing and having the playbook take advantage of that.
I think that's one of the few benefits of getting older, long in the tooth, is that, having gone through it a bunch of times, I have confidence in the long game, and I've seen it work before. And it's one of the reasons that, for example, we have annual quotas here. We don't have quarterly quotas. We recognize that the ramp time can be 6 to 9 months or more in greenfield territories where there's no pipeline, there's no prior proof of performance and Halo accounts to leverage. Right. And so we do take a very long-term view of that. And it can be a little nerve-wracking when you have a quarter or two that are less than your expectations. But if you're doing all the right things, you're hiring the right people, you're putting in the right processes, and you're engaging with your customers in a sort of respectful, patient way, recognizing that your priorities are not their priorities, eventually that does come back to benefit you and the company. And, that certainly happened here, and it's happened in many of the companies I've worked for previously.
Certainly, certainly. Again, kind of going back to your experience and background, you have the benefit of working for venture funded startups, large organizations. Sometimes, again, to the point of incentives and goals aligning, we often find that sales teams and marketing teams, often they all row in the same direction towards one goal, but sometimes there's certain level of friction in terms of SLAs, in terms of expectations, in terms of who does what, and kind of from your perspective and from your experience, what are some of the tactics to make sure that it's probably never going to be frictionless, but what are some of the tactics and some of the ideas on how to structure a relationship between sales teams and marketing teams, specifically in the cybersecurity context, that will make both of them more effective and productive?
I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, because I've been really fortunate to have worked almost seamlessly with every marketing leader that I've been paired with. And I think it's much easier in a startup to get that alignment than it is in a large established company where you've got long entrenched individuals and much less ability to affect where the marketing investments go. But if you take joint ownership of the outcome, which is, at the end of the year, did you hit your ending ARR target together or not? If you're able to get joint ownership of that outcome, then I think the discussions around what investments should be made and how we measure them, and where we double down versus maybe de-invest, those are much easier, right? So you have to give credit to your partner on the marketing side for their contribution, and then take responsibility if the joint decisions that you made at the beginning didn't result in the outcome that you were planning for, right? It's not one or the other's fault. If you create that plan as a team, then you own it as a team. And I think that it just makes it a lot easier to work with partners, across the executive team, but certainly between sales and marketing.
Certainly, certainly. I know we're coming up on time, and just last few questions. Again, go into the point of kind of sales methodologies. It seems like every year or so there is a new meme that just captures everyone's attention. For a while, it was inbound, that I think was popularized by HubSpot. Everyone was running into that direction until people realized only a fraction of a percent of inbound actually converts to paying clients. Then it was all about events and kind of RSA and Black Hat and regional events kind of built a huge following. Then obviously with COVID, everyone went to kind of webinars and whatnot. Now it's a chat GPT. Then everyone is scared, thinking that this technology will be making phishing emails undetectable. But in the same side, I think it probably will impact the sales profession as well. Imagine you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future of how cybersecurity sales will look like 6 months from now, 12 months from now, what do you think, in your view, what are the kind of top 3 themes that will be top of mind for chief revenue officers in 12 months' time?
So perhaps I'm being naive and I have my head buried in the sand, but although I find ChatGPT interesting, I don't really foresee that making a big impact to cybersecurity companies that are selling to large enterprise CISOs. So it sort of depends on, your ICP and where your product fits. It is so much more than just getting an email in front of the right person, right? That's just top of funnel, and there's lots of ways to generate top of funnel. Right, with enough money, you can generate enough top of funnel with SDRs, with digital marketing, and so many other methods. Right, it is far more about the expertise that you bring to the table, proving the value of the product in a long POV. In our case, right, sometimes 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months. It can be a very long sales process, and every decision now is by committee. Right. So you've got to build relationships with all of the stakeholders across an account to get a deal over the line. So when you're focused on large enterprise and what end up being large investments on the part of the customer, how you get the top of the funnel names doesn't really matter. It still comes down to relationships, expertise, patience, competence, right? So I'm not worried about that impacting salespeople in the enterprise space. 12 months from now, I do think that there will be a shift towards CRO and customer success leadership blending together, perhaps becoming the same person. Right, we're starting to talk a lot more about having a chief customer experience officer, because as a SaaS company built on an ARR waterfall, retention and net dollar retention, so upsell, cross-sell to your existing customer base, is the most important metric that I care about and look at. And in order to ensure that you have a really high customer retention rate and a really high net dollar retention rate, it's helpful to have one person that's responsible for the entire customer journey, right? From pre-sales to the sales process and POV itself to post-sales customer success. I think we're going to see some places where there's a combination of our CRO and then chief customer experience officer or customer success leader.
Interesting. Amazing. Brendan, this was so insightful, and I appreciate you taking time for this. Where can people find you? Are you, as all of us, are you mostly on LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best way to connect?
I'm on Twitter, but I think I can count the number of posts I've made over the last 10 years on one hand. So yeah, mostly LinkedIn.
Excellent. Brendan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.